morning, Kathryn.
Good morning, Jody.
Kathryn Cliatt, OP of Dade County, Florida. You're the
Yes.
first one I have ever known that was born in.
I know, not many people were born in Miami. I don't know, I never met many people who were born there either, but there must have been.
Yes.
I guess they just left soon.
And is that south of Miami or north?
It includes Miami.
Includes
It
Miami.
includes a lot south of Miami, Miami, and north of Miami, yeah. It's a big county.
Mm-hmm. And your mother and father, tell me about them.
Well, my father was from a little town in Arkansas, but he was raised in Memphis. His father was a doctor. And then my mother was from Savannah. And they both somehow came to Miami. You know, they lived through the Depression. And Miami apparently had jobs. So they both came to Miami, and that's where they met and married. And they stayed there until the 80s, when I moved them up to Georgia to live near me.
And gave birth to two beautiful daughters.
Well, yes, I guess you could say that.
And you were the first.
Yes.
Did you ever feel spoiled?
I never felt spoiled, but I'm sure I was. I was the first grandchild also, so you know, of course I was spoiled, but I think probably in good ways.
Well, what are the gifts that your parents gave you? Not monetary gifts, but
No. Actually, my father was a policeman, and my mother didn't work until we were older, because she wanted to be at home with us. So we were really poor, but I never knew that until I was an adult. I never felt poor. I think that's one of the gifts they gave me, was to appreciate whatever you have, and that there's no such thing as being poor. It's your attitude. I shouldn't say there's no such thing as being poor, but we were lower middle class, and we certainly had everything we needed. I think another really, really great gift they gave me was their spirituality. My mother was up every morning an hour before we got up, and that's when she meditated. And my father, because he was a policeman, worked different shifts. And two of the shifts, when he came home, he went to bed before I did. And so I would stand in the doorway and watch him as he knelt by his bed to say his prayers before he got in. So that was just, those were norms to me.
Mm-hmm. And what church did you go to?
Well, it depended on what age I was. I started going to, I think it was a community church when I was about 5 or 6. I went with my girlfriends.
So
my parents did not go to church. They
Isn't that remarkable? I mean, their spirituality?
Well, yes. I think they weren't raised in churches, and yet they had a very deep faith in the divine, and very strict rules of morality. So I think those were just gifts that they had and that they passed on to me. So I went with my girlfriends, and we went from church. I went to different churches. I went to every mainline Protestant church between the time I was 5 and the time I was 18, 19.
And which church were you attracted to?
Well, I stayed the longest in a congregational church, and that was when I was in my early teens. Mm-hmm. And I think the attraction was the pastor had his doctorate in theology, and so his homilies were really sound. And we had a very active youth group. And of course, when you're in your young teens, that's a very important part of church. Mm-hmm. So I was there almost until I went to college. And then I went to the Episcopal Church for a while. And when I got there, and then right after I had gotten into I hadn't joined it, I just was going on Sundays. And after I was going to the Episcopal Church for a while, I went to Berry College and met Catholicism for the first time, and I thought, well, gee, why be an Episcopal? I should go whole hog and be a Catholic. There's not much point. So similar, except that the Catholic was older in tradition, and so that I did join the Catholic Church at the end of my freshman year then.
Right in Coriezu Chapel?
Well, no, I had to do that in a parish, you know. Yes, so I went to a parish, and I was friends with the pastor there, and so that was very nice and very convenient. And one of my best friends was my godmother.
You've always felt close to your God, though, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
From an early age on.
Yes, I think the first experience that I remember of feeling the presence in my room was when I was 5. And it was something that I knew I wouldn't be talking about with anyone, not even my parents. That was just between God and me. I don't even think I used the word God at that time. I didn't know. I just knew that there was a presence in my room that I liked, that made me feel very comfortable and good and secure and happy. Probably as I went to church, I learned the word God and
divine.
And attached those words to this experience. But that just set into me a deep longing to continue that and deepen that. And so all of my life, I just took time for prayer and meditation, mostly meditation.
Did you ever attend any retreats while you were at Berry?
Oh, yes. And before I went to Berry in the Protestant churches, summer retreat's a big deal for kids. Oh, yeah. Always went to retreat and always loved it. And then at Berry, because I always had, when they had the freshman retreat, I went in, because I was a day student, my home was close enough to Berry that I could drive there. And so I went in and reserved a room for retreat. And that first retreat, it was a week long, I guess, or 6 days anyway. And the last day, I just went to chapel at night. It was quite dark, just a dim light on by the tabernacle. And I knelt down and I realized that God was inviting me to religious life. And I did not want to do that. I just thought, this is not my plan for life.
What was your plan?
My plan, well, really interesting. My plan was to be a missionary. I wanted to be a foreign missionary, and I wanted to have at least a dozen children. I love kids. And I was dating a really nice guy at the time that was a good prospect for a husband, so this was not part of the plan.
No.
And I knew as I prayed there, and tears are just streaming, because I knew that though I didn't have to do this, that it was an invitation, not a command, that if I didn't do it, I would never be totally satisfied, that my life would not be totally fulfilled, that I could be happy, but that there would be something lacking if I didn't say yes to this invitation. So I just hid it and thought, well, if it's going to happen, God will have to make it happen. So I didn't talk to anyone about that either.
Well, I would imagine the sisters and the environment at Berry had a profound subconscious effect on you, or inspiration for you.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I was overwhelmed, really, by the nuns when I went to Berry. I had never met in any church people who were totally committed to the message of Jesus, to living it out. Any place I'd been in, any church, there was always the backbiting, the gossip, and this person's popular because, that person's not because. And as a young idealistic kid, that's one reason I moved from church to church. That wasn't part of it. It didn't fit, and I didn't think it was the way we Christians should be. But when I got to Berry, it was such a different atmosphere. Every student felt that she was important. At that time, Berry, it was Berry College, all girls, all women. Every one of us felt that we were important to our instructors, and that they would do anything to help us pass. They would meet us at any time to tutor us. I mean, it wasn't, some colleges you hear of today, it's, we weed out the freshmen who don't belong. That was the opposite at Berry. It was, you all belong here, and we will help you as best we can. So it was just a tremendous experience for me, and I wanted to be like them.
Mm-hmm. So after your freshman retreat, is that when you entered?
No, because, with canon law, you have to be a Catholic for at least 2 years before you can enter religious life. And it was after that retreat that I was baptized.
All right.
Well, and at that, when I was in chapel at the end of the retreat, I realized that I had to be a Catholic to be an Adrian Dominican sister. So I went to see Monsignor and said, I think I want to be baptized.
At your parish church,
yes.
or church near you?
Yes.
Yes.
So So that was kind of the way it worked.
So now you're a Catholic.
Yes.
And what year in college are you?
I'm a Catholic at the end of my freshman year. And then at the end of my junior year, Mother Gerald came for visitation. And I was so naive, I didn't know how the workings were, and I didn't think any of the sisters even knew I was thinking about religious life. Now, of course, I'm showing up for Mass every morning, even though I'm a day student and I have to drive there. And I get there early enough to join them in meditation. No, that never occurred to me that was
A sign
to give them an idea that maybe this is what I was thinking about. But when Mother Gerald came, one of the sisters came and said, Mother Gerald would like to have a visit with you. So I just thought, well, she has visits with some of the students, so I went to have a little visit with Mother Gerald. We visited a very short time, and she said, well, when would you like to come? Well, I was completely taken off guard, and I said, I don't know. And she said, well, how about this June? Well, this was February. I hadn't told my parents, I hadn't told my friends, I hadn't told anyone that I was even thinking about going. And yet, there was something about Mother Gerald that you didn't ever say, well, no, I don't want to, or not yet. Or, I mean, you just sort of did what she suggested. And so I went home and told my parents what I wanted to do, and that I wanted to go in June. I was 21 by then, so they couldn't really stop me, or they thought they couldn't. And they wouldn't have wanted to anyway.
Yes, no grandchildren.
Well,
No
that was
wedding.
the issue, but they didn't tell me that until just before I left, that was one of the big issues with them. It was the first time in my whole life that I had ever done something that they didn't want me to do. We just had a wonderful relationship, and we talked things over so that it was such a, there was nothing adversarial about the relationship between us, even through my teen years. It was always good. And so that was heartbreaking for me, that I was doing something they didn't want me to do. Although they said, I don't want you to, so strongly, it was very clear that that was not what they had in mind. And just before I left, they did say that, you know, I wouldn't be giving them grandchildren. And that was a big thought of mine, too. I wouldn't be giving me children. But
really, they're the ones that instilled in you this desire for the divine and a deepening of the divine.
that's true.
Yes.
I think they had no idea it would lead to this.
Yes,
So.
right. Well, who was the president of Barry at that time? When you were the
Edmund,
sister.
Sister Edmund.
Mm-hmm. And the sister that helped you,
Sister Elaine Scanlon.
did she make your outfit for you, or?
Oh, yes.
Oh, how
She or one of the other sisters helped, but anyway, yes, they got me all ready. See, she was my sponsor because when I first went to Barry, she had all of the non-Catholics, and everybody had to take some kind of a religion class. And if you weren't Catholic, you took this class for the non-Catholics. And I was just so full of questions. And finally, one day, she gave me a copy of the Summa and said, here, I think you'll find some answers in here, volume 1 of the Summa. And I thought, oh my gosh, this church has all the answers. I was really impressed.
You were.
And that was only volume 1.
I know, and a freshman reading.
Yes, yeah,
reading
well.
the Summa.
Yeah, well, so she and I became good friends, and then it was time for me to enter. She sponsored me.
Well, I know you've had a variety of missionary and mission experiences, and let me skip through a few to get to Tampa Catholic. Tell us about your experience at Tampa Catholic. Who is the principal?
Julie Sullivan. Well, she was there. She was the principal for most of my years that I was there. I was there about 9, maybe 10 years. Tampa Catholic was a public Catholic school. We took students from all of the Catholic feeder schools, and then anybody else who wanted to come. And the beautiful part for me, because I had always been attracted to working with people who are economically poor, was that it didn't matter whether you could pay the tuition or not. You still could come. If you really wanted an education, you could come there. And Julie found ways of raising the money. The parishes all were taxed, of course, as is true with any high school that has feeder schools. They were all taxed. And then we had several fundraisers during the year. And I think because people knew that it didn't matter how much money you had or didn't have, you could come. Because those were the years of uniforms, you couldn't tell who was poor and who wasn't.
Oh, beautiful.
It was really beautiful, and I very much appreciated that.
And that drew you to the Appalachian area, did it not?
Well, yes, I felt that just increased my feeling of a call. And after Vatican II, then we could discern where we wanted to go for mission and for ministry. In fact, Tampa Catholic was my last assignment, and I stayed there through those years, more and more longing to do real missionary work. And a group of 4 of us discerned through 1 year. I guess it was really through one summer. A group of us agreed to meet in Adrian and to do some discernment. We all wanted to do poverty work, but we didn't know where. So
And
we did.
Who were part of that group?
It was Jean Cassidy and June Resico. I lived with those 2 women in Tampa. And then 2 more actually joined us, just overhearing our conversation in the lunch line, Joanne Peters. And
That's okay.
Wright, she's left us. She has since left us, but Mary Jo Wright.
Oh, yeah.
And so we, that summer, did a great deal of research of where were the pockets of poverty in this country and where was the church least represented. Well, it's the Southeast. The Southwest certainly has pockets of poverty, but there's far more Catholic presence in the Southwest. The Southeast is the Bible Belt, Baptist, Holiness, and very, very few Catholics. So we decided that's where we would go, and we would meet the next summer and discern some more. And so we wrote to the bishops of Atlanta, Savannah, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And we all agreed to meet at the airport the following Christmas and go and visit these bishops and see where we would be called. Well, the long story short, we ended up in Atlanta. And because there was a house just north of Atlanta in Forsyth County, the diocese had just purchased a house because people were begging for a church there. They'd been begging for a while. And so they said, well, you can, there's a house you can live in. So we were happy to have a house to live in. So that's where we started. And we started with this little tiny parish of very few people, but once we were there, it was like people were crawling out of the woodwork. You had to be careful even saying you were Catholic in Forsyth County.
Were there Ku Klux Klan?
Oh my, yes,
Oh
yes,
my.
oh yes. They, as soon as we moved in, they were calling us on the phone telling us that if we didn't get out of town by sundown, they'd burn us out. We were so naive, we didn't believe it. We thought it was kids on summer break just being silly. But then, and the house had been vacant for a while, so the locks had all been turned around. So we were locked in, but we couldn't lock anybody out. There were no screens on the windows. And it was so hot, there was of course no air conditioning, so hot you had to have your windows open. So we were very exposed if the Klan really wanted to do something. And then at the end of a month, we had worked very hard. We built all of our furniture and had tried to put in a garden. And we decided we owed ourselves something, a treat of some kind. So we went into Atlanta for dinner and a movie. So we got home at about, a little after 11. And a pickup truck pulled out of our driveway, and you could see the shotgun and the shotgun holder in the back window. So we just looked at each other. That made us a little bit more nervous about the phone calls. So then the next morning, we saw some shells of bullets on our back deck. So we called our pastor, who lived in another town. He was pastoring 2 little rural mission churches. So he came over, and he got very excited about it. He didn't think it was a joke at all. Called one of the parishioners who was next door neighbor to the head of the Klan, and he called him and said, the sisters really don't know what to do. We didn't know whether we should call the highway patrol, the sheriff, or the police. We didn't know who would protect us and who was in cahoots. So we got a call back in about 10 minutes and said, you probably won't have any more trouble, but if you do, call the sheriff. We never got another phone call.
The message went out.
The message went out to leave the sisters alone, which he must have had quite a bit of influence on his neighbor for that to happen. But, and then one of the men workman came. He was working on the electricity. There were a few repairs that needed to be made. And he said he had had a little much to drink every day that he came, but still he got the electricity going. Made us kind of nervous, but he was going to kill himself right there. But he got the work done. One day he said, you know, for $50 we can have your house burned down. We didn't know whether he was giving us information, whether he was warning us or threatening us. And so we just sort of let it pass and prayed.
Yes.
And then he came a couple weeks later and he said, you know, they've heard about you on the other side of the mountain and they say it's okay. Well, by then we had started helping people. I went to pump gas one day at a little efficiency place and went in to pay for it, and the man there said, why are you here? I mean, that was a greeting we got everywhere we went. Why are you here? So we had these little handmade cards of who we were, and I handed him a card with our phone number, and I said, we're here to help people who need help, people who the agencies aren't helping. So, you know, if you know somebody that needs help, just have that person call us. I no sooner got home than the phone was ringing. So the woman was in the store at that time.
That needed help.
She needed clothing for her kids to go back to school. So just before that, we don't know where they came from, 2 big plastic bags of clothing were put in the back of the part that we were using for church. So she and I sat on the floor, pulled the clothes out, and found clothes that would fit her children, and we sent her on her way.
So that word traveled.
That word traveled fast. Then people began coming. And as people came, other people gave. So a big ministry that we call, the people call the Sisters Place, but we named it The Place. It was like a multi-purpose facility for people who were down and out or people who needed assistance. And from that developed, actually that being one, there were 9 nonprofits that we developed.
Quite amazing. And how did you have the skills to even do that from high school to starting nonprofit?
Didn't you have, you know, when God sends you out, I think we've all had this experience. We've all taught a grade we probably weren't qualified to teach. We've all done something that we were not qualified to teach and thought, how in the world am I going to do this? But we trusted that if we were being asked to do it, God was asking us to do it, and we'd be given the grace and the talents to do it. And that's always been my experience. When we were first in Georgia, as the people began to come to the place, we began to realize that there were people actually without enough food, didn't have proper shelter, didn't have clothing. And we thought, this isn't right in the United States of America. You know, very self-righteous. This shouldn't be happening here. So I heard about legal services. There was an office about 30 miles away from us in a little town called Gainesville. So as people would come, I would write up notes, and I began to call them and say, you know, is this right, or can we do something? Oh, that's not right. The first time I called, they said, you know, you live in a very good county. Your county really must take care of people because we seldom get referrals. Well, it was that they were scared to death. They couldn't go over to legal services. So I called a few times giving them cases, and then one time somebody called me, and one of the men called me and said, would you come in for some training, because you're doing a good job there and that county needs a lot more help than we can give it. So can you come in for training? I said, oh, sure. So I went in for paralegal training. And there I learned what the nonprofit was. And I learned that the nonprofit corporation is the greatest tool that a poverty worker could ever have.
Because?
Because the corporation belongs to the people. Nobody owns it. The board cannot gain anything from being on the board. They have to be totally invested in helping with this endeavor. And the people are the board. It isn't, we sisters, the only time we were on a board is if we started the nonprofit, we were on the board. I was on the first 2 boards because people didn't know how to be board members and they had to be trained. So as soon as they were able to be a board without me, then I would resign. And never was I president. Always it was one of the members of the community who was present.
Kathryn, this is an amazing story of empowering the lay folk. Is it not? Don't you?
Well, that was purpose.
Yes.
Actually, that was our purpose, yes.
Now, I don't want to skip over the rest of your life because I know you had an incredible experience at Cedar Hill.
Yes.
Was that a
That was,
nonprofit?
that was one of the nonprofits, yes, and that was a retreat center.
And you
Yes.
and what sisters joined you
At this
there?
point, June Resico was there. We were the last two. We had other sisters who came and went. Nancy Ann Turner came and for 5 or 6 years, and then she moved on. And June and I were the last two there. And we both felt called to start this retreat center. We were taking care of people's material needs, and we thought, let's see if we can do something about spiritual needs. We drew mostly women from Atlanta. There was nothing in Atlanta except, you know, the Rosary Society or the Altar Society, but there's nothing for theological education, particularly for women. And so that's what we did at Cedar Hill primarily.
For how many years?
Well, some of the years, I was there for about 30 years, but some of the years we were still doing the poverty ministry in town at the place. And the rest of the years we were doing the retreat ministry, and then from 92 to 98 I was a chapter prioress, so I lived there, but was doing the chapter prioress ministry. Once in a while would do a retreat too.
And then you finally became a missionary
Right.
in Kenya.
When I was 75, I became a missionary in Kenya.
Finally,
Yes,
that dream came true.
Finally, my childhood dream came true.
And just briefly, your experience with the orphanage, the
Well,
women, young women there.
It was one of the best experiences of my life, really. They taught me so much. Most of the children, the girls, well, it was preschool through senior high school. Through the first class graduated our last year there. Most of the girls were either orphans, and many of them had watched their parents die, either being murdered by another tribe or dying of AIDS, or they were killed in a car accident. And those who weren't orphans came from situations, villages that were so poor, they couldn't educate them, they could barely feed them. And that's why Father started the two villages, a boys' village and a girls' village.
So it was Bud and Sue Ozar that invited the sisters,
Yes.
right?
They had been there for about 3 years, Sue teaching at the school. And when they came back to the States, they started a nonprofit, another nonprofit, to support the school, St. Clair. And a Father wanted American sisters there. And so Sue said, I know just the community. And she came and advertised. And when the advertisement came out, my heart just did a flip. And I thought, you know, I felt like I was being called to this. And yet I thought, you know, I'm almost 75. I'm too old to do it. If I were 50, yes, but this can't be a call. Then the invitation came to come for a weekend. And I came for the weekend, and I knew the first night that I was going to Kenya.
How beautiful.
It was just a certainty. But with all the hardship of those girls, they had the deepest faith in God. They trusted that God would take care of them. They were happy. I didn't find girls just complaining about what had been done to them. Very unlike so many people I've known in our culture who expect everything to be, you know, so good for them.
So who were the sisters with you that?
The ones who went with me were Krista Marsick, Maureen Barzantni, and Renee Ritchie.
And every Sunday in our chapel, St. Catherine's Chapel, one of the women from the orphanage is with you. Tell us that story,
yes.
however briefly you can.
I know we're out of time, aren't we? Purity Mitu was of the first graduating class. And
in Meru.
In Meru, yeah, at St. Clair's. And she and one other girl were tied all through high school for first place. All through high school. Sue got a scholarship for Mercy, the other young lady, to Chestnut Hill in Philadelphia. That's Sue's alma mater. So she went and saw the president and got a scholarship. And you know, we said to Sue, these two girls are equal. We've got to find a scholarship for Purity. It just wouldn't be fair otherwise. So she came and saw Peg, figuring that because of our connection, well, sure enough, We got a scholarship
Peg
from
Albert
Peg
at
Albert,
Siena.
the president
Yes.
of Siena, yes.
God bless her.
Bless her, bless her,
Yes.
bless her, yes. She's contributing a great deal to actually to that country, not just to that
By
one
their
young woman.
education.
Yes.
Is she doing well?
Purity has a 3.9 plus average.
She knew English before she came.
English is her fourth language.
Oh, my heaven.
She knew the two tribal languages of her parents, Kikuyu and Meru. And then Swahili is a national language, so as soon as they go to school, they're taught Swahili in school. And they're also taught English in school because it's the national business language. So she knew English, not terribly well, but she knew it well enough to get A's in English as a freshman. But she works very, very hard.
Well, I would ask you if you have any words for those women, because I'm sure Sue and Ozar and Bud Ozar are there now. They would see that the women hear this. So whatever words you have. But before that, I just want to thank you for your ministry through these years. It is an inspiration to me. I'm sure many of us listening will think we haven't done a blessed thing.
No, that's not true.
I know. I know. We each have done what we are supposed to do.
That's right.
And you have time now to re-experience and deepen your 5-year-old experience of the divine. Is that not true?
That's true. You can have as much time as you choose to take. There are wonderful places on the grounds for prayer and meditation. So yes, yes.
And your words for the girls.
My words for
St. Clair.
the St. Clair girls is never give up hope and study hard, because study and education will make you successful in your country. And you are called to make Kenya a better place.
Beautiful. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Kathryn.
Jody.
Yes.